What the fuck is up, everybody? We are back with another Force the Vote episode. I don't have any rhymes. I don't have anything but exhaustion. I've been searching around for something heavy to hit myself in the head with. This is going to be quite a fucking show. We are taking the dead horse, this carcass at this point, the rotting flesh off the ground as it has already completed its rigor mortis, and we are here back to parade it through the public square one more time here at the Vanguard. How are you, Gavin?
Doing well, guys. What's up, everyone? Welcome back to the show. And yeah, this hopefully will be our final Force the Vote centric Vanguard episode, at least in the near future, if not ever. Trust me, we'd love to stop talking about this. We'd love to move on, but we can't move on as long as people keep fighting about it. We're here to, give the commentary, the play-by-play, and if that's what people are discussing, that's what we're discussing. So it's not our fault. Don't blame us. Blame everyone else for continuing to talk about this, but just kidding. We're happy to talk about it. It's an interesting conversation, although, as Zach said, definitely a bit of a dead horse at this point to continue beating.
Yeah, I always say that the Vanguard is like, we're if all of left YouTube was a parade, right? We would be the shit scoopers at the end in overalls, after the elephants have walked by and all of that shit. And so, here, what have we been left with but a pile of elephant dung to sift through. I think Gavin might be having a little bit of internet issues, so he dipped out and came back in again. Looks good. That was faster than I was expecting. I would have just rolled with it otherwise. But anyway, we can get into shouting out our patrons, getting into the Force the Vote drama again. It's absolutely insane. As if Force the Vote didn't have enough legitimate people that opposed it, like Jimmy is now making up new enemies for Force the Vote. Years later, 2 years after it's absolutely it's lunacy. It's a blatant grab for clicks and to try and capitalize on the anniversary of Force the Vote. But we'll get into all of that. Before we do, shout out to the patron community, all you lovely fuckers that keep the lights on at the Casa del Vanguard. Really appreciate all of your guys' support. You're all comrades in our heart. Just hit the like and subscribe button. But if you can't afford to support us, $5 or $10 a month really goes a long way. The link in the description below.
Absolutely. Hit up that link, guys, in the description, patreon.com/the Vanguard channel. You're always going to find it in the description of all of our content. Hit that up. It's a great way to support the show. If you enjoy our perspective, really appreciate that, guys. And as Zach said, also make sure to hit that like button before we get started. That's another great way to get the conversation rolling in the chat. Really enjoy watching you guys discuss while we discuss alongside in the chat. So make sure to let us know what you guys are thinking. And like I said, please hit that like button. If you're new to the channel, also make sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell. I'm assuming most of you guys have been longtime listeners, but if anyone is just tuning in for the first time to the Vanguard, like I said, make sure to hit that subscribe button and that notification bell so you don't miss the next live stream. But yeah, a complete shit show going down over Force the Vote, which is crazy given the fact that it's been like over 2 years since that discourse initially occurred. The discourse, which, by the way, Zach and I essentially built this whole channel talking about. Any longtime listeners out there might remember back in the day when Zach and I were really just started to pop off on YouTube. It was mostly based off of discussions reacting to people debating Force the Vote online. Of course, Jimmy Dore, Kyle Kalinske, Krystal Ball, Brianna Joy Gray, Katie Halper, etc. on one side, and then we got Sam Cedar, Cenk, Anna Kasparian, and some other folks in that camp on the other side. And it was definitely an interesting discussion. And the reason why now it's all being relitigated and rehashed is because what we saw happen with Kevin McCarthy in the House, his speakership essentially being held hostage by Matt Gaetz, Lauren Boebert, and a handful of other GOP Congress people. It went to 15 rounds of voting, and just finally last night, Kevin McCarthy finally did clinch the speakership, as it says here, after a historic battle with GOP rebels. So he did finally clinch the speakership shortly after midnight last night. I was actually, monitoring Twitter as this was all going down. I thought it was pretty funny, the fact that it got to this point. But I'm not going to lie, I kind of wish that Gates and Boebert and crew had kept it going even longer. I was kind of hoping that they would, drag this out for at least a couple more days, maybe try to get to like 25 rounds of balloting or voting. But nope, they decided to wrap it up. I think that, shit was getting a little bit too intense on the House floor. There was like a physical altercation that almost occurred where one representative lunged at Matt Gaetz and had to be like physically restrained by another member of Congress. I can try to find a video or a picture of that because that was pretty intense. And Kevin McCarthy basically just begging Matt Gaetz to cast his vote for him and to just drop this fight, which he eventually did, but not after securing some concessions, which we can talk about in a second. But yeah, the historic stalemate has been resolved, and it has certainly been quite frustrating for the GOP. The California Republican Kevin McCarthy's hard-won ascendancy follows a feud that saw a group of far-right conservatives repeatedly defy him and could preview a new era of divided government. McCarthy reached an agreement with more than a dozen GOP detractors that allows them to wield more power in the new Congress after weeks of tense negotiation. So before we get into some of this force the vote rehashing and some of the drama that occurred alongside that discourse, what was your reaction to Kevin McCarthy finally clinching the speakership?
Yeah. So obviously it was hilarious to watch unfold. If you're a political junkie, you just like watching the sausage get made. It's pretty funny. The absolute shit show that is the Republican Party will never cease to amuse you for the most part. I mean, except for when you think about they are the majority power in the House of Representatives, even by a thin margin. It's still absolutely shocking to watch how they all engage. As you mentioned, it almost went like fisticuffs on the floor of Congress the other day with an actual physical altercation, which was hilarious. I think that like Lauren Boebert was also involved. It was a real mess. It was a spectacle. I saw like an overview of it, and it was just a complete clusterfuck. But on the other hand, it is worth noting. Like all of these people are completely odious and bad faith actors with their own fucking, nefarious goals that I don't agree with, right? I'm not here to uplift or celebrate any member of the Freedom Caucus, right? The freedom that they're offering is not a freedom I want. But I think we do have to say, like, look at what they fucking did. They really created a storm. They created a real mess for Kevin McCarthy. He feels publicly embarrassed. He feels, shorted by them. And, this is the first time in fucking, I think, history that it's gone to this many ballots, at least in recent history that it's gone to this many ballots. I know it was 4 ballots was like the first time since like 1923 or something. So, for the people that are concerned with the pomp and the circumstance and the, I don't know, just the pageantry of Congress. I think that that's going to bother them. But for regular people, I think that it is true that the Freedom Caucus probably earned some of respect from people, in a way that I think maybe others on the left or Democratic Party might not understand because they're so, happy to pat themselves on the back and take a look at like, oh, look, the Democrats have their shit together. They're united. Look at how these Republicans are all chaotic and they can't handle. And it's like, that might be your position as somebody who has a vested interest in the other team. But from a neutral standpoint, seeing people put their feet down and like actually negotiate for what they want and say, hey, I'm going to exercise my power and I'm going to do something. That's something that's attractive to your average voter, particularly somebody who is not steeped in any kind of partisan politics. And so I think that that's something that the left should consider and unpack. And I mean, obviously the parallels to force the vote have been, made abundantly clear.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think that actually the media has kind of misrepresented this whole episode as so embarrassing and, such a humiliation of the GOP. But I don't really think that your average American watching this unfold feels that way about it. Basically, the kind of tactics that Matt Gaetz and Lauren Boebert and crew have employed are basically just, they're trying to shake things up. They're bringing that raucous energy to the floor of Congress, which has been absent from, politics in America for a while, it seems. And again, despite the fact that I don't agree with these characters, my politics couldn't be further from Lauren Boebert and Matt Gaetz and these fools. That goes without saying. But when it comes to that raucous energy and that ability and willingness to defy leadership, I think that's an incredibly attractive strategy and an incredibly attractive positioning towards leadership that I absolutely wish we saw more of from the left, obviously, hence my advocacy for the progressives in Congress to force the vote. And shout out to you, Stacey. Really appreciate the 1999. That's super generous of you. Would love to see the left in Congress mixing it up. Absolutely. 100%. Again, if the same strategy was employed, but just in favor of better, more substantive asks, I think that would have been awesome. And we're about to talk a lot more about that on today's live stream. But thank you so much, Stacey.
Yeah, absolutely. And I couldn't agree more, right? And I think that a lot of people feel that way. I think that sentiment, like, okay, yeah, what Matt Gaetz, Lauren Boebert, etc., are fighting for is not what I would fight for, right? But you can divorce a tactic from its, intended result, right? And I can say, oh, wow, that they actually were able to extract concessions from, Kevin McCarthy and the leadership in a way that we were assured would have been disastrous for the squad if they'd done so. And I think it's even more hilarious to have regular ass Joe Schmoes walking around being like, it's so embarrassing for the Republican Party. I'm like, dude, it is not embarrassing for the Republican Party to regular people. Like, it's amusing and embarrassing to us because we understand the kind of like craziness that's going on behind the scenes, but to a regular person, they just think this is how politics is done. They just think that this is what actually happens in Washington, that there's debate, that there's discourse, that vote for what you actually believe in, right? Or you tactically maneuver to try and, gain more concessions. That is what people think is happening all the time.
Yeah, 100%. Thank you so much, Stacey. Got a couple more super chats we can quickly address before we get into the drama, the main breakdown of today's episode. So really appreciate the generosity, you guys. Thank you, Anon, for the 269. Breaking points equals CIA psyop to siphon populist sentiment. Yeah, got to disagree with you there, Anon. Thanks for the super chat, but yeah, got to disagree with you there. And we're going to be talking more about breaking points in a second here.
That Gavin's a psyop. He's also paid by the CIA. Everybody besides Jimmy Dore in the gray zone, they're all paid by the CIA. It's true. It is a world global cabal conspiring against Jimmy Dore because the government knows what kind of threat he presents. They do. Oh God, they don't want Jimmy out of his cage. Boy, howdy. It is all about stopping Jimmy Dore. He's just too good at reading the gray zone for money.
Shout out to you also, Brian Frederick, for the 499. Jimmy Dore is right about force the vote. Cenk and Anna need to take the L and start holding the squad accountable instead of defending their capitulation. That I can't disagree with, Brian. Despite Zach and I's criticisms of Jimmy Dore, yes, he was right about force the vote. And Cenk and Anna absolutely need to take the L instead of continuing to strawman the position of force the vote and what the actual point of it was, as we'll get to in a second, because we have some TYT drama to discuss as well, with them specifically going after Brown and Joy Gray in a pretty uncharitable, bad faith way, in my opinion, no pun intended. So we're about to get into that as well. Thank you so much, Brian.
Yeah, and it's crazy that they keep, all of these battles we've just seen waged before. Like, Cenk was like, Brianna Joy Gray is a fake leftist. Brianna goes on TYT to debate Cenk, reveals that she is a very authentic leftist. Cenk, Brianna Joy Gray is a fake leftist. Like, oh my gosh, it's like our timeline is so Groundhog Day energy right now. But yeah, really appreciate you, Brian.
Yeah, appreciate that. And thank you so much, Kevin. 1963, really appreciate the $20, man. That's super generous of you. Really appreciate the support.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Shout out to you, Kevin. Really appreciate that. And I hope you enjoy the show today.
Absolutely. So yeah, I did want to take a look at a couple things real quick before we get into this drama, and we'll address all the super chats in a moment. But I did want to get started on today's main story. So here's some of the concessions that Matt Gaetz, Lauren Boebert, and crew were able to secure from Kevin McCarthy in the process of holding up his speakership and preventing him from just outright being coronated as the new Speaker of the House. So let's take a look here. It says 1 member motion threshold to force vote ousting the Speaker, more House Freedom Caucus members on House Rules Committee, hold votes on lawmaker term limits, border security bills, changes to appropriations by letting any lawmaker offer floor amendments. McCarthy aligned Super PAC pledge to not spend money in primary races against GOP candidates in open races. So that's not nothing. Like, that's not nothing, guys. That's some pretty impressive concessions to get from the leader of the House caucus for the Republicans. And I think it's definitely proof that this strategy can yield serious results when pursued aggressively. Can you imagine what sort of concessions the squad the progressives in Congress could have gotten in 2021 from Nancy Pelosi if they had pursued the exact same strategy. A lot of people say, maybe the floor vote for Medicare for all wasn't necessarily the best ask. And, I think that's a fair criticism. It's not one that I share. I think that a floor vote for Medicare for all during a pandemic at that time would have been a great ask, and it would have been great for the movement for universal health care. I think it would have helped with the momentum. I think it would have helped keep the conversation focused around that policy. It would have helped keep the movement enlivened, et cetera, et cetera. However, the one criticism of force the vote that people make that I do think is coming from a place of good faith is that, well, there could have been better asks. There maybe could have been different concessions that were more realistic, or for whatever reason better. I think that's fair to say. And if you take a look at some of these concessions that they got from McCarthy, I think you can get a good idea of what the squad could have actually realistically achieved. More members of the Progressive Caucus on House Rules Committee, stuff like that. Just specific things around the edges and little rules like that they could have, had tilted in their favor instead of the nothing burger, which they did receive for voting for Nancy Pelosi. They didn't get shit for that. They basically just gave her vote for nothing in return. So yeah, what do you think about some of these concessions, Zach?
Yeah, look, I hear what you're saying about the floor vote on Medicare for all, but to a lot of that, it's like, okay, yeah, I think you hold your concessions, right, and you are, whatever they were looking for, whether this has something to do with like maybe you try and slip in a big bold progressive piece of legislation into maybe like an upcoming infrastructure bill, right? You got to remember back 2 fucking years ago, right, when Joe Biden was first elected, there was a big conversation about infrastructure bill. So you could have gone down that road, and I would have supported that 100%. I did support the floor vote on Medicare for all, and everybody's asking like that was going to be like some horrifying defeat. That's not at all what would have happened. It would have lost. It would have probably gotten like 7 to 10 votes max, and then all of those other motherfuckers in Congress we know do not support Medicare for all. So when you see on their little fucking taglines like, oh, healthcare is a universal human right, that's a lie, right? You get those other 6 Congress people that did vote for it. They get to go on TV and tell everybody why they're the only ones that support why everybody should have a healthcare. And oh, don't you remember just 6 months ago at this time, right? Because this was years ago. We're still talking about this. They could have pointed to all of the pandemic history, right, that we were seeing, saying that, oh, it's an abomination for anybody to die because of lack of access to healthcare. Look at what we did to this country to protect everybody. It would have sold itself, okay? And I'm not saying it would have passed, but it would have done a lot to, at the worst time for the progressive movement, after Bernie bowed out and after Joe Biden had been inaugurated and everything had been stamped out and we'd gotten nothing and we thought we were getting nothing and it felt like shit. It would have been a good time for us to reignite that fucking, that spark, right? To just get after it again and say, hey, no, we're still about this, right? And then the same way that, we can't let Joe Biden's complete ambivalence and opposition to criminal justice reform and the Black Lives Matter movement and, his lack of response to police brutality, we can't let that ever, dissuade us from, pushing forward for this and making these demands and whatnot. And same thing with Medicare for all of these things that he's shown nothing but like derision and aversion to. You have to keep putting in front of the public's eye, otherwise they'll forget about it. So it made complete sense to me on that front. But you're right, Gavin. It could have been anything. It could have been getting an actual, House floor vote on $15 minimum wage and making sure that passes, and then it goes to the Senate, and maybe it can't pass in the Senate. So I mean, yeah, that wouldn't have necessarily been my go-to, but I thought that because there wasn't basically anything that the House was going to be able to get done besides like a niche like amendment or something like that, which I also would have been supportive of, or like committee assignments and more of what we saw from Gates and Bobart. That's why I leaned for the floor vote on Medicare for all, because I was like, well, this is something that like the symbolism is worth a lot to, and the fact that it will create more of a dialogue and a discussion around it. But yeah, I mean, I think that there's definitely a lot to learn from the squad over here. Not sure what's going on with Gavin's internet, but that's
sorry,
funny.
I was just opening
Oh,
the
it's
door.
okay. It just froze on you while you were walking, and you had like big like big bun and bow on. And
my bow.
Yeah, I think you might want to try leaving the stream and coming back really quick before we move on to the next story, because you're frozen up again too.
Really? Okay,
yeah, I'm not
sec.
able to see you. Like it's just like a still image. But anyway, I think that there's a lot for us to take away from this. Again, it feels like beating a dead horse. It feels like I have talked about why we need to force the squad to use their leverage. It's crazy that it's been such a fucking time, a long misbegotten process to articulate that what I thought is a no-brainer, that the squad should be utilizing leverage wherever it fucking can be utilized in order to effectively pursue the goals that they stated when they were running for fucking office. I thought that was the job of a politician. Instead, we've gotten a lot of Vogue camera shoots. We've got people going to, the Met Gala. We've gotten a lot of that. We haven't gotten a lot of healthcare. We haven't gotten a lot of meaningful strides. I've seen a lot of slay queens. I haven't seen a lot of action and tangible outcomes.
Yeah, 100%, 100%. I think a good place to start here, because we were just talking a little bit about Anna Kasparian and TYT. We can take a look right here, because it does look like Anna Kasparian had some words about Brianna Joy Gray on a recent episode of the Young Turks. I want to take a look at this, and regardless of the personalities involved and the specifics of the interpersonal drama here, I do think this is a frustrating talking point you hear a lot from not just TYT, but specifically from anyone that's been opposed to the force the vote strategy. I find this to be a little bit of a straw man, and we'll take a look in a second, and I'll explain why in a second. But here's what Anna Kasparian had to say about the continual discourse around this issue, and specifically name dropping Anna Kasparian. Specifically name dropping Brianna Joy Gray.
One super chat, because it asks an important question, and I actually was tempted in talking about this a little bit in the previous segment, but I decided against it. Now I'm going to. The question is, can you explain how this force the vote is different than Dems force the vote? There are lots of force the vote proponents who say AOC should have done what the Republicans are doing now with Pelosi in 2020. Well, remember, force the vote was about withholding votes for Nancy Pelosi's speakership role until she made the concession that there would be a floor vote on single payer healthcare in the House, which would have failed. Okay, so the ask was for a vote that would fail.
Okay, so just to pause it here before she gets to the part where she name drops Brianna Joy Gray. She's not wrong. It would have failed. The floor vote for Medicare for All likely would have failed. And if the squad members of AOC and the likes had come out and said, hey, we see what you guys are saying. We see what you're asking for. We don't necessarily think this is the appropriate ask or the most realistic ask. There probably would have been some pushback, admittedly. And I think that was a perfectly, reasonable thing to ask for. But if they had come out and said, instead of doing that, we're going to vote no against Nancy Pelosi, and we're going to ask for something in return for voting yes eventually, just like how Matt Gaetz did. So if they had come out here and said, here's the list of things we are going to ask for, it's not going to be a floor vote because Anna Kasparian, just explained that would fail. If the squad wanted to employ that logic and say this is not something that's realistic, but here's what we are going to use our leverage for instead, we would not have seen the same sort of backlash. The people that came out here and were very critical of the squad members and who coined the term fraud squad and all that stuff, I think they would have been a lot more generous towards AOC, Rashida Tlaib, Cori Bush, etc., had they actually done something. Mostly what people wanted to see them do was use their leverage to hold up Nancy Pelosi's coronation as speaker and, make them vote over and over and over again, just like we saw the Freedom Caucus doing with Kevin McCarthy. So I think this is ultimately just a straw man from Anna. And if the squad members were so averse to the idea of demanding a floor vote for Medicare for All, they could have asked for any number of other concessions, which they didn't, which was the problem.
100%. I completely agree.
I at this point, I almost just wish that it would have happened, because I would give anything to have Brianna Joy Gray move on with her life and maybe talk about something different. Like, it's ridiculous. But this McCarthy situation is different because the concessions that McCarthy has agreed to don't even matter for the group of Republicans who refuse to vote for him, okay? They don't care about the concessions. They don't trust him, and they've said so. They don't trust him. They're not going to vote for him. It's not about concessions. The whole force the vote thing was about an ask that would have ultimately failed and could have potentially hurt single payer healthcare or the pursuit of single payer healthcare, because maybe some who might be open-minded to it would be less open-minded to it if it's already failed through a House vote. You get what I'm saying?
That's
Anyway.
stupid. There's absolutely no evidence for that. Guess what's all kinds of shit failed before it passed. There's a long history of shit coming to the floor of Congress, not having the votes. Hey, Anna, how many votes were there on Kevin McCarthy? Did he still pass? That happened today. How many rounds of voting? I don't know. I think that after one or two, you can't really try anymore, because then people are going to be so disheartened. No, it's not how fucking voting works. Guess how many times they had to put up like right to work to get it to pass, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like that happened over and over again. But with marketing, and that was nefarious as all fucking shit, right? They had to name it right to work, which was literally the right to lose your fucking job, right? Like, okay, and these are just a few examples off the top of my head. If you gave me longer, I could find a litany of bills that have been put through multiple times. There's just no, I mean, sorry guys, we need to shut the fuck up about the minimum wage, because the parliamentarians struck it down and now everybody thinks that's a bad idea. Nobody supports $15 minimum wage, because that I mean, Joe Biden said we were going to get it and now we're not going to get it, and I can't ever talk about that again. Also, shut the fuck up about student debts, because that didn't really pass the first time, it got struck down. So never ask about that again, because that really put a damper on the movement. Now everybody wants to keep all of their debt and pay it off with sweat and toiling at their minimum wage job, which is not $15 an hour, it's $7.25. That's the popular position, right, Anna? Because those other things failed already, right? No, of course not. And you have to have fucking rocks for brains to think that.
Yep.
At this point, I don't even care. I wish it would have happened so we could just move on. I'm so tired of like the personal branding exercises that are like forced upon us day in, day out by people who can't move on from something that happened literally in like 2019 or 2020. But let's move on. There's other stuff to get to.
And again, there is a reason why people are talking about it. Like, it's not like people were just needlessly deciding to rehash this conversation, although that has occurred for sure in the past. There is a good reason why people are talking about this right now. And it is a legitimate conversation to have about the strategy and about the point of sending progressives to Congress anyway, supposedly anti-establishment figures into the halls of Congress. Like, what the fuck is the point of spending money, time, and energy as a movement electing people to Congress to fight the establishment if when they get there, they don't fight the establishment and they just go along to get along and do whatever they're told to do? This is a legitimate conversation to have. And again, whatever you think about Jimmy Dore and his specific tone or tactics, I think we can discuss the idea of using leverage as a politician and, forcing concessions from leadership in order to prioritize the needs of your movement, the movement that elected you in the first place. Anyway, Brianna Joy Gray actually responded to this clip because as Anna said, I wish Brianna Joy Gray would just shut the fuck up and move on. Essentially, Brianna responds and says, "Force the vote advocates are on record supporting any number of asks as early as December of 2020. See, for example, my piece in Current Affairs, which incorporates David Sirota's asks. But Force the Vote detractors insist on criticizing the ask because they've been exposed as not understanding power." And to be honest, I totally agree with Brianna Joy Gray. The fact that people like Anna Kasparian, Cenk Uygur, Sam Cedar continue to pretend as if other asks, other concessions weren't mentioned, brought up, and discussed by Force the Vote advocates is completely disingenuous. And I think it is fair to say that they continue to criticize this ask because they know it's a good strategy. They know it's a good idea. The Republicans just proved how effective this strategy can be. But since they can't admit that, they just have to straw man it by talking about this one specific ask that Jimmy Dore came up with, the Medicare for All floor vote, because they see that as, easier to go after, easier to criticize as a strategy.
Yeah, and the other thing is they haven't done their fucking homework, right? Because they, we couldn't do X, Y, and Z. We had to go after a more realistic goal, right? But then you listen to their criticisms, and they're like, "Oh, that floor vote on Medicare for all, it would have never passed," right? Okay, well, let's pull up this tweet from AOC, which was in response to Justin Jackson. And guys, this will really let you know. This is from December 11th, 2020. Okay, so this is we're throwing back, we're digging up receipts here. I don't even know if fucking Justin Jackson still watches BreadTube. I know he doesn't make it anymore. So this is how far away we've come from this, right? But he was a real center point in the early stages of Force the Vote. Anyway, she says you can use leverage to put for things that can happen and change lives, i.e. a $15 minimum wage vote in the first 100 days. Doable. Well, here's the thing, guys. If you're talking about things that can actually pass, like it was always true that Joe Manchin wasn't going to vote for a $15 minimum wage. It was always true that Kristen Sinema wasn't going to vote for a $15 minimum wage, right? That's why we went through it and did it with the you just needed the simple majority, right? For when it was going to, and then the Senate parliamentarian said like fucking budget appropriations or whatever the fuck it is, where you need less votes because it's considered a matter of like the budget or whatever, and it went all down like that. Either way, right? They didn't necessarily have the votes for it, which is why we don't have it. And then they just blamed it on the Senate parliamentarian, right? Who could have easily been fired if they wanted to actually pass it. This was their scapegoat. This was their like, okay, we don't want to be blamed for this. How do we find some bureaucratic reason for this? So we didn't get that. And elevating longtime progressive champions to important positions of leadership. One, where are those progressive champions? Because I don't see fucking any of them in Congress. I don't think there are any progressive champions to promote. What are we going to get? Pramila Jayapal, who plays fucking useful idiot for the Democratic establishment at every fucking turn, who will sell the movement down the river at every fucking turn. Ro Khanna, whose wife has like 85 fucking houses. Okay. Yeah. Oh, Ro Khanna's just concerned about some of the legislation and the wording and the verbiage and the stock banning bills. He doesn't in principle believe that it should be all about representation and having a good relationship with your constituents. But hey, these are people too. Congress doesn't pay that good, anyway.
Yeah, it's completely pathetic. And yeah, I think just total gaslighting from Anna and intentional ignoring of the real substantive asks that were being offered alongside the floor vote for Medicare for all, which again, I agree with. I think that was a good ask. I'm just saying there were other ones too. If the squad members had wanted to pursue a different concession, they easily could have. And again, even if they thought that the floor vote was stupid, they could have said, all right, well, let's force the vote for this, or let's hold up Nancy Pelosi speakership for this concession or this committee appointment or whatever the hell, which they fucking didn't do. Let's take one more look at some more TYT action. Cenk Uygur also put out a pretty dumb tweet here, which Jimmy Dore responded to along the same lines. So this was from Cenk just yesterday. He says in response to a tweet saying, "This isn't leverage, it's a fiasco. It would have been the same had the squad pulled this stunt." And it's literally wasn't a fiasco. They did get concessions and they did use their leverage. But that aside, Cenk said, if the squad had pulled this stunt, just like the right wing is doing right now, yes, they would have been clowns. This is what hashtag Force the Vote wanted. But if they had insisted on getting a vote on a very popular bill like $15 minimum wage or paid family leave, it would have worked, which is different than what he was saying at the time. And also just completely uncharitable and inaccurate to say that everyone in the hashtag Force the Vote movement wanted the squad to look like clowns or something. Like, no, the people that were advocating for Force the Vote wanted them to antagonistically resist Nancy Pelosi's speakership role. They wanted to resist the corporate direction of the Democratic Party, the direction of the party, which was intentionally snubbing all of the priorities and policies of the Bernie Sanders movement, such as Medicare for all. These people weren't just, trying to create a circus for the sake of spectacle. No, they actually were interested in policy, and they wanted to see some goddamn results from these Congress members who people in the progressive movement spent so much time, energy, and money electing in the first place with nothing to show for it. So I think that's completely uncharitable of Cenk Uygur to say. And also, again, yes, a lot of people agree, David Sirota, Brianna Joy Gray, et cetera, that perhaps, they should have forced the vote on something else, like a $15 minimum wage, paid family leave, or any other number of priorities. It didn't just have to be the floor vote for Medicare for all. Either way, Jimmy Dore responds and says, no, you said if the squad, quote unquote, pulled this stunt, aka used their leverage and forced the vote, it would have handed the speakership to the GOP. Don't you remember? And post some receipts here. Cenk Uygur from early 2021 saying, for all the people pushing hashtag fraud squad, do you understand that if all 10 Justice Democrats had voted present, GOP leader would be speaker right now? What would that have accomplished? Easy being destructive. You have to come up with a plan for being constructive. So this is also incredibly inaccurate. Obviously, as we now know, Hakeem Jeffries repeatedly secured more votes than Kevin McCarthy on basically all of the rounds of voting up until round 15, where Kevin McCarthy finally clinched the speakership. And at no point did Hakeem Jeffries become Speaker of the House because of that. So clearly, Cenk just didn't know what he was talking about. He didn't know how this process worked, which I guess is fair given the fact that we don't see this unfold very often as a new Congress comes into power. This hasn't happened in the last 100 years. So I can understand why, maybe your average layman would have that misconception. But Cenk is a political commentator who's supposed to know the ins and outs of Congress and the rules surrounding these sort of, power moves. And the fact that he was this ignorant about it and now wants to come out a year or two later and say, oh, I supported the strategy, just not the ask. Well, that's actually bullshit, because this tweet proves that no, you were saying the whole strategy was bad because it was going to end up electing a Republican, something that is very obviously not true, and something that was pointed out to you at the time that was not true.
100%. And this was repeated by all kinds of people, not just Cenk Uygur and TYT, but it was also repeated by Sam Cedar over at the Majority Report. This was one of the primary talking points, right? Which is, it was never true. But here's the other thing that really fucking breaks my ass about this, right? Like, okay, we've caught Cenk with his pants down with the receipts. He's misrepresenting his argument right here. But if we go back to his last tweet, he says, if the squad had pulled this stunt with something like a $15 minimum wage, it would have worked, right? Because that's popular. One, Medicare for All is extremely popular, right? It absolutely massively popular piece of legislation. If you ask people and do polling and say, hey, the burden of your health insurance is fucking terrible, right? And you're scared to go to the doctor because you don't know what the fuck's going to happen. And if your kid gets hurt and breaks his leg, you don't want to lose your fucking house, right? Yeah, dude, I don't want to lose my house if my kid breaks my leg. I just want to rush them to the hospital and know that they're going to be taken care of. Yeah, me too, bro. How about we do that like we do public schools, right? We want everybody's kid to go to school, public education, K through 12, build this country up, make sure everybody's smart and taken care of. Yeah. Let's make sure that our kids aren't broken too, right? And fuck it, while we're taking care of the kids, let's just take care of everybody, elderly, middle-aged, fucking, able-bodied. Fuck it. Let's just take care of everybody. Yeah. Hey, we already do it. Every motherfucker that's ever enlisted in the military can go to the VA, right? I was actually just talking to my grandparents about this. Now, I know the VA is criminally underfunded and we need to do a way better job with taking care of our veterans. But they've been building a lot of fucking VA medical facilities around Kansas City, and they look fucking good, man. I think it would be a good opportunity for the left to start drawing some parallels. See, this is actually what socialized medicine looks like, because it's 100% socialized medicine in this country. If you are listening right now and you are a veteran and you take advantage of the services you earned as a veteran through the VA, that is 100% socialized medicine. You have been the recipient of socialized medicine your whole life. I'm talking to you, Dad, because I can see that you're listening right now. So, but anyway, so shout out to that horrible argument that Cenk was making. But also on top of that, the $15 minimum wage vote, like, this is what's crazy to me, because even people that cover politics all the time, you have to explain the basic institutions of government to them constantly, because everybody just forgets. So we have two chambers in Congress, right? We have the House of Representatives, which is what we've been discussing, right? And then we had the Senate. Now, we haven't really been talking about the Senate too much because for our goal and our stated demand, which was a floor vote on Medicare for All, forced the vote, that was, the Senate was irrelevant, right? We all were operating under the clear understanding that this bill was not going to pass and then move on to the Senate to be litigated by fucking who Mitch McConnell was the leader of the or one of the Senate leaders at the time. Mitch McConnell and Chuck Schumer, whomever. My brain is foggy on when this started. Who was still technically the majority speaker. Anyway, it would have been deliberated by them. No, of course not. But we do know that the $15 minimum wage was sent over to the Senate, and it fucking failed. It failed. So if this whole idea was to avoid watching a piece of legislation fail, you guys are with your pants down right here. So if you can pull this up, Gavin, really quickly, just for receipts. This is from last year. 8 Democrats defect on $15 minimum wage hike. Okay, so get the fuck out of my face. This would have worked if it was a $15 minimum wage. You guys don't understand anything until I explain it to you really, really goddamn slowly. Okay, the idea was to drum up support for a piece of legislation and exercise power. It was to say, hey, this is still one of our demands, and we are going to be a fucking thorn in your side until you do something about it. That was phase won. Then it was go on TV and talk about how criminal it was that all these people who had just lectured and lectured and lectured you about the pandemic and about how everybody's life is extremely valuable and we have a responsibility as citizens of this country to make sure that everybody's medical needs are taken care of, and it's about all of us and playing our role, and all that World War II kind of patriotism that you can laden that with to make your fucking argument. Okay, so it's all flimsy, and it all comes down to really what it all comes down to, guys. And this is how the left will never win. And even it rubs off on me. It's Jimmy Dore is such an annoying fucking prick that anything that came from his mouth was never going to work. He's so fucking antagonistic and just, for the most part, downright unlikable that nobody wanted to organize with him. And his name alone, and the fact that he has nothing but vitriol, and he loves the fact that everybody hates him for the way that he presents himself, besides his like most dedicated fucking followers. He loves to be an antagonist. And even when, like, because Jimmy doesn't actually give a fuck if these things happen. So it's all about the antagonism. And that's why I think that Force the Vote was never able to take off. And that's why you see so many people who are just rabidly opposed to it, and they have no good reason to be. It's because they won't just come out and say, I fucking hate Jimmy, and that's why I won't support anything that's ever come out of his goddamn mouth.
Yeah, and I don't think that's a valid reason to be against Force the Vote, and I don't think that's what you're saying
Stupid
either.
as fuck to be opposed to it.
Yeah. But I do agree that his like unnecessarily antagonistic nature, not just towards the Congress people themselves, who I think absolutely deserve the vitriol, but more towards some of his actual allies, or people that would be his allies if he let them be, unnecessary vitriol towards those people. And that's what we're about to take a look at now. This caught my eye because this video is called Breaking Point's Host Caught Lying to Protect the Squad. And this video is about exactly what we've been discussing. But if you guys remember, Breaking Point's host, Krystal was one of the biggest supporters of Force the Vote. She was at the Force the Vote town hall, as was her hubby, Kyle Kalinske. I don't know specifically about Saagar, where he stood on the matter at the time, but Saagar has been supporting what Matt Gaetz and the fellow, Freedom Caucus members have been doing with Kevin McCarthy. So clearly he supports this strategy. I think that, I was a little bit confused when I saw this, to be honest. I'm like, wait, what are you talking about? In what way did they lie in order to protect the squad? And oops, I just realized I pulled it up the wrong tab. Here we go. We can take a look here. We're going to get into all these super chats in a second, guys. So keep them coming. And I promise we'll address all of the super chats here in a second. But yeah, I wanted to take a listen to this and see what you thought, Zach, and see what you guys in the chat thought as well. Because to be honest, I don't think this is a terribly good faith criticism of people who were, in fact, Jimmy Dore's allies, that were proponents and advocates of the Force the Vote strategy in the first place and continue to be so. So I do think this is an example of some of the unnecessary divisiveness that Jimmy Dore brings to the table, especially when it comes to this specific topic. And again, I'm interested to see if you guys agree with us.
Yeah, I haven't seen this yet, but I saw the headline and I was like, Jesus Christ, Krystal literally fucking bent over backwards and supported Force the Vote. Went on your fucking show where you didn't do anything productive with all of your fucking donations that you got, right? Sources close to the matter say that he took all of the money that he got from the like fucking 50,000 some odd dollars, however much it was, from that massive live stream. Because if you guys remember, he did like a big ass fucking live stream, right? And typically when shows of Jimmy's size do that, they donate the money, right? They do like a big fundraiser over a cause, and then they publicly, like Vosh will do this all the time. Like he'll post a receipt and be like, here is how much money we generated from Google ads during this night. Here's me taking it out of the fucking bank and, donating it to X, Y, and Z. Jimmy didn't do that. To be fair, he didn't market that he was going to donate the money. But again, sources close to the matter say that that money ended up in the hands of the Movement for a People's Party, which did fuck all to advance Medicare for All's activism, right? I could think of a dozen organizations off the top of my head that would be in tears with that kind of money and actually making big strides. So anyway, I saw this. I was like, Jesus Christ, Jimmy, this is why your ideas will never work. And I'm starting to think that the dude doesn't give a fuck, that he just wants to, bathe in hell, to set fire to everything and just be an antagonist. And I think that, that's fine if that's the role he wants to play, but there's absolutely no mistaking this guy for any kind of like serious, like good faith kind of activist at this point. This is all entertainment for his very niche specific audience.
Right. And yeah, let's take a look here. Again, I'm excited to hear your guys' reaction to this because I can't really find a way to interpret this other than uncharitable and bad faith as far as his comments about breaking points go, which again literally did support the strategy in question. But let's take a look. He gets into the breaking point criticisms just a few minutes in, so I'm excited to break this down.
That are lying again about force the vote. Now, I'll show you this. Remember, Ilhan Omar tweeted this out, part of the squad. She said, yes, we can with a slim Dem majority in the next Congress. Anything can be possible. Turns out nothing was possible. Absolutely nothing. It will literally take 5 courageous progressive members to get concessions on progressive policies. There is literally not one courageous progressive in Congress. Literally isn't one.
You know, it's the difference between stand-ups and improv people. Like, that's why they didn't like your sort.
That's right.
Because these are improv people.
These are
very
improv.
different.
Very different.
They're more yes and.
Yes. That's why
Off a
Stephen
cliff.
Colbert.
Yeah.
That's right. So look what they're doing here. So they took Ilhan Omar's advice and they got all these concessions for their vote for speaker. And the reason why you wanted to do a force the vote, a Medicare for all, reason why you would do that is because sometimes it gets members on the record so people can't make excuses. Sometimes these votes create real political pressure that forces developments. And sometimes we vote for historical record. Let the future generations know that we did everything we could. So
Force the vote. Hashtag force the vote.
Hashtag force the vote. They didn't do anything, right? And so now people are trying to rewrite history. And what they actually did was turn on the activists who wanted them to do something, force the vote, and get something for their vote. For what they did was they turned on us, and they said that we were committing violence against AOC. That's what they said, and that we don't know what we're doing.
Hey, Gavin, could you try muting? Because I think you have another video playing in the background that's getting picked up by your mic.
Oh, sorry about that.
And then we were children and all kinds of names, right? So now they're rewriting history. Now, Krystal Ball was actually for force the vote very tepidly, but she was for it when we were doing it, right? So, because she knew it would be bad to come.
Tepidly, meaning didn't come out and white knight for me at every opportunity whenever anybody said anything remotely mean about me is what Jimmy wants. Jimmy wants fucking absolute devotion to him. Not just, oh yeah, I agree with you, Jimmy. I think this is a good idea. That's not enough. That's tepid. Not coming on your show and saying, I agree with you and all the points that you're making and I really want the squad to do it. That's tepid. That's tepid. What he wants is for her to just come out here and like fucking linebacker tackle anybody that says anything sideways about Jimmy Dore and the force the vote movement. Absolutely ridiculous and petty right here. But anyway, I just had to break in.
Come out against that. But now she is going to run interference for the squad. Watch this.
And then the last thing you have to say about this is, this is the identical situation that the squad was in last time around when Democrats had a very narrow majority in the House. There was pressure on them to do something with their numbers to get their own concessions, whether that was key committee positions or whether it was certain votes on the floor of the House. And they have completely taken a different tack. And I think we see now.
So she's implying, she goes, they completely took a different tack. They didn't take any tack.
It shouldn't be called a squad because a squad does things
together.
Yeah, right.
They didn't do anything. So she's pretending like they chose a different strategy to achieve progressive goals. That's what she's saying right there.
She literally did not say that, though. Like, straight up, she didn't say that. She just said that they did something different. It's like, well, like, I'm just going to try and find something to be pissed off at you about that. You are literally just doing deep diving, like trying to read between the lines to find some reason that you can attack breaking points. And because Jimmy's desperate to start beef with them because they're the outside of like Jimmy and TYT and the Majority Report, that they are the biggest powerhouse. And I think probably relevance wise, as far as people who are watching them for actual news, they probably just clobber us all. Obviously they clobber us, but I think like most of what Jimmy's audience is coming for, and honestly probably Sam Cedar's audience is coming for at this point, is way more entertainment, whereas I feel like the Breaking Points audience is coming in a lot more for the news. Long story short, Jimmy wants to create beef with them because it's really good content for him. So he is reaching like a motherfucker. He is reaching at nothing there. He's grabbing at air. It's pretty pathetic, actually.
Yeah, I find this very distasteful, specifically because Krystal Ball, Kyle Kulinski, the people he's name dropping here as if they're somehow enemies of this movement or detractors from the strategy. These are literally people that supported it at the time, that were its best advocates. I think at the time, Jimmy even said Kyle Kalinske was the best advocate for Force the Vote, that he did the best job articulating why the strategy was important and why it was necessary. Their opinions have not changed either. It's not like just because they had a falling out with Jimmy Dore, now they've all of a sudden turned into contrarians and want to act like, you know, their opinions have changed or their minds have changed on this. No, they're still out here explaining why it was a good idea, and why the Republicans, holding up Matt Gaetz's speakership proved to be quite successful as far as extracting concessions go. So I do think this is a perfect example of Jimmy Dore's ego and his narcissism getting in the way of any sort of camaraderie with his allies, with people that should be his allies, with no regard for that. Like, these people are supposed to be your friends and your allies, and again, they literally stuck their neck out for you, even though it was kind of unpopular to do so at the time, in order to support this strategy. They were at the Force the Vote town hall, which Zach just referenced. I find this completely unnecessary and honestly just inaccurate as well.
I'll play it for you again.
Oh, well,
Okay.
I think
I just want to alienate the squad. They're our best hope.
Watch this. This is amazing. This is like Kyle Kalinske sleight of hand right here. Watch this.
And they have completely taken a different tack. And I think we see now, with the level of concessions that this group has already been able to extract from McCarthy, that and the way that the squad has been completely sidelined in the Democratic Party, that was clearly the wrong approach.
Oh,
so she's now pretending that the squad has been sidelined in the Democratic Party, and they didn't see that coming. They didn't know that they would be sidelined by Nancy Pelosi. They didn't really know that. So this is the second lie, right? So they didn't take a tack. They didn't have a strategy to get progressive goals met. They didn't do frickin' anything. And now she just made that lie. There's another one coming. Hang on.
They thought they could play an inside game. They thought that would be the way to ultimately pursue and achieve their policy objective.
Now, that is 100,000% lie. That's what she looks like when she's lying. If you wanted to know what Krystal Ball looks like when she's lying, that's what she looks like. Because
I just don't understand. She didn't lie. She said that they were sidelined. She said that was a poor strategy. She said that she supported Force the Vote. I don't understand. He's looking for shit that's not there. He's looking for shit that's not there. Brian, I'm not focusing on his tone. I'm focusing on the literal lies that are coming out of his mouth right now. He is looking at something that Krystal says. He's taking somebody who agrees with him, and then he's saying, you're not saying it hard enough. You're a fucking liar. He's saying that you're not taking the tone that I would. He's saying that you're not taking this like hard line. I'm going to burn every bridge and call everybody a fucking fraud and alienate everybody that doesn't already 100% agree with me. Okay? Because that's what I do on my show. Well, guess what? She hosts a different fucking show with a very different candor and a very different audience. Okay. So it's just absurd that he's trying to portray this as some sort of nefarious lie. No, it's not. And go after somebody who, again, was one of the most consistent supporters of Force the Vote. It's just absolutely absurd.
Yeah, I totally agree. And, referencing Brian's super chat, let's focus less on Jimmy's tone and more on the substance of his argument. Yeah, we're not focusing on his tone. He's the one that's focusing on tone. What Krystal Ball is saying is 100% accurate and 100% substantive. And she's been on point as it relates to Force the Vote from the very fucking beginning. And this is of great importance because this kind of camaraderie that needs to be built among a movement in order for it to be successful is actually something that's very legitimate to discuss in the context of being a successful movement that gets these sort of concessions and that is able to achieve some level of success. If you have no sense of allyship with people that are on your side, then yeah, your movement's probably going to fail and you're probably not going to get what you want. And we need to discuss this. And, this is part of the reason why Force the Vote failed in the first place.
100%.
That is a fucking lie. They didn't have a strategy. They didn't do anything except turn on the activists, lie about what they were doing, and then roll over for the corporate machine and vote for everything Nancy Pelosi told them to. They didn't oppose her one bit.
Also, I keep bringing this up, but they also were heavens to Murgatroyd. What if Kevin McCarthy becomes speaker? I can't get over that. That was the big, because then Kevin McCarthy.
Yeah, that's right. But that's not the, I don't know if the squad said that, but what she's saying, but lots of people defending them said that. You're right.
Just for the record, Krystal Ball never said that, ever, a single time.
Right about that, Kurt. But what she's saying right here are 3 huge lies. So she could keep her access with the squad or her whatever party she wants to be invited to, or keep.
AOC has never been on Breaking Points, and neither has any other noteworthy member of the squad. They've done 1 interview with Bernie Sanders, and that was for the Krystal, Kyle, and Friends, and it was just Krystal Ball. So again, for the record, all that access they're getting over here. But while we're calling other people liars, right? Let's just clear the air with some truth really quickly.
Yeah, that's the ironic thing about this segment and Jimmy Dore in general is he loves to call people liars, but oftentimes he's the one fucking lying and just blatantly mischaracterizing his opponent's viewpoints and opinions for the sake of dunking on them and scoring internet points, which is clearly his main, prerogative.
100%, but we can keep letting this go for a little bit before we get to the super chats.
Keep her donor money. I don't know what. I don't know. I can only speculate. But those are 3 big lines. Do you see how slippery she is when she lies? You wouldn't catch it the first time. She's like, oh, she's saying that the squad was wrong. That's what it looks like, right? Looks like she said, oh, the squad is wrong. She's saying they were wrong.
Yeah, right.
No, what she is lying about.
Was she a politician? I mean,
she was. She wanted to be a politician like Cenk. She couldn't get elected. But what she is trying to make you think is that they just made a mistake. That they actually they had a different idea on how to meet their different tack on how to meet their progressive goal. They never had one freaking they never had an idea on how to get there. They didn't have any intention of doing any of that. And what that's called is a lie. That's a lie.
So I just want to introduce everybody to how Jimmy covered this back, before it had been years down the line when he was listening to Krystal's coverage of Force the Vote. I just want to take a second to go back and listen to a different Jimmy Dore before he decided that he had to hate Krystal and Kyle because it was good for clicks and he felt like personally wronged by them. Let's just really quickly for everybody see if Jimmy was singing a little bit of a different tune, right? So I want to play a video from the Jimmy Dore show called Krystal Ball is Correct about the left's response to Force the Vote.
Here. Hi, Ron. How are you, buddy?
What's up, Jimmy?
Oh, man,
Good
it
to
makes
see
me
you, man.
nostalgic.
Happy holidays.
Happy holidays.
Seeing a friendly face on the fucking Jimmy Dore show. Somebody that, wow, a good person. You never get to see that anymore. Fucking crazy.
Holidays. So there's been a lot of hoopla happening about the hashtag. And instead of me going back and doing it myself, I'll just piggyback off her great video. So I'm just going to play it in its entirety. We'll stop and start it. Ron and I will comment because she makes some great observations about what this moment is revealing about the left. Hashtag Force the Vote moment. It's revealing a lot that a lot of people who you thought were going to fight for Medicare for all actually are never going to fight for Medicare for all. It's revealing that. It's revealing a lot of people whose whole life have been saying, well, I'm for Medicare for all. And when the time came to fight for it, they're not doing that. That's very revealing right now. People bending themselves who claim to be on the left and claim to be for Medicare for all, bending themselves in pretzels to not do it. But she's also talking about there's been a lot of heat, or there's always, whenever they talk about the left-wing media sphere, it's always done with derision, even from the liberal class. And she nails that here. Watch this.
The Force the Vote debate over whether or not progressives in Congress should demand anything at all in exchange for supporting Nancy Pelosi for Speaker continues to rage on. One of the latest entrants into the debate was a kind of a strange piece from Yasha Levine over on Substack. Now, Yasha actually admits that he agrees with the idea of forcing the squad to do something, as he writes. What's the point of seeking congressional power if you're not going to use it to make a scene, gum up the works, and show up your enemies?
So anyway, I won't play too much of this, but Jimmy goes on to praise Krystal Ball for having the foresight to see through all of this, appreciates the fact that she's gotten on board and, fully swinging this, and now like 1 year later, year and a half later, you're gonna pretend that this lady is your ardent enemy because of like the weird context clues that you're pulling out of an obscure clip that you've pulled to be massively charitable to your own argument. Hey guys, this is what I'm talking about, guys. This is the clearest example. I don't know what to say to people. I know that a lot of people like Jimmy Dore. This is the clearest example of bad faith behavior possible. This is the clearest example of bad faith behavior possible. He literally praised this woman over and over again, invited her onto a show. She again talks about the necessity for this argument, and then he's going to say in the weird lines, well, what she's actually inferring is the exact opposite of everything she's ever fucking spoken about her entire career. I'm going to project on her all of the biases and all of the like neoliberal hysteria that I, have conceived in my mind that all of my enemies must share. Project that onto somebody who has absolutely never advocated for those policies. Be like, oh, well, she was a politician, right? LOL, failed politician. Yeah, you're a washed up comedian, okay? You do that like oh, yeah, Jimmy's all touring around like he's literally telling jokes about politics because he needs to jerk off his own audience for money. Like, no, let's not go into people who have failed careers. I'm a bartender. At least I know what the fuck I am, right? Anyway, so he's got cheap shots. He's got bad receipts. But I don't know. I just feel like that was a massively unconvincing video and honestly a new low for Jimmy Dore.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. And shout out to you, Brian, for the $4.99. Really appreciate it. Let's get through some super chats now. The squad and Bernie rarely even mention Medicare for all. They praise Biden's expanded COBRA subsidies into ACA instead. Pathetic. Yeah, couldn't agree more. It is really depressing to see the energy behind that policy fizzle out. And that's, of course, a big part of the reason why Zach and I were fervent Force the Vote supporters in the first place.
Oh, yeah. I mean, yeah, AOC's fucking Cobra comments and the $15 minimum wage and progressive, on caucus seats. That was all a big lie. It was all a ruse. It was a head fake, red herring, whatever you want to call it. 100% agree with you, Brian.
Yeah, thank you so much. Got another one from Richard. Thank you so much, Richard Wilson. Did Democrats learn anything from this as far as the Republicans holding up Kevin McCarthy's speakership? I doubt it. I mean, we'll see if the next time the Democrats are in control of the House, if they pursue any sort of a similar strategy. Obviously, we'll advocate for them to do so, but I highly doubt it, given the fact that they all just fell in line and voted for Hakeem Jeffries to be the new speaker without an ounce of resistance from any of the so-called progressives.
Yep, I doubt they learned anything. And then the idea is, to go back, to throw one back to Jimmy Dore, where he was correct. It's like they're not actually learning, right? Like they don't want to learn. They are just continuing a process of fundraising and then getting reelected and then fundraising and then getting reelected. Actually accomplishing goals is not part of their, agenda. The squad is more supportive of military aid to Ukraine than Medicare for all. How can this be the left flank in Congress? Well, because we're fucked in America, right? I mean, for the longest time, Bill Clinton was the left flank in this country. John Kerry was the left flank in this country. So we have itched it a little closer to the mainstream's understanding of the left, but the left has no authentic representation in the walls of Congress, right? I mean, this goes back to stuff that like Ralph Nader used to talk about. There is no authentic representation for the left in Congress. We had a proxy. We had the closest we'd ever gotten with Bernie Sanders, but that guy's not an authentic leftist, right? That guy's a guy that's committed to working within the machine as it exists, which is something that I feel like is, fundamentally at odds with a leftist, even though we share some policy goals like Medicare for all and like a Green New Deal and like raising the minimum wage, because there's some humanistic overlap there from a policy position and from a like an actual worldview position. Obviously, there's no authentic left representation in Congress. Yeah, and that's 100% true. They did do that, which I thought was stupid as fuck.
Yeah, it's absolutely crazy and just such a frustrating contrast watching them all vote, every single round. If you were watching C-SPAN last night, as Matt Gaetz and Lauren Boebert and the rest of them continued to vote no against McCarthy, every single Democrat, progressives included, all were more than happy to vote for Hakeem Jeffries, which was quite frustrating. And if you want a further illustration of that contrast, let's take a look here at this recent clip from MSNBC where AOC talked about the Democrats and how united they were and how there would be no defections, as if that's something to be proud of.
It did not go unnoticed, shall we say, on the internet and elsewhere, that you were on the floor having some conversations with Republicans, including Matt Gaetz and Paul Gosar. Can you enlighten us at all as to what those conversations were like? And is there any hope that you guys work
I think in chaos, anything is possible, especially in this era. It is unlikely. There's always a possibility. I do think that in terms of some of those conversations, I mean, listen, some of us in the House of Representatives are independent in certain ways from our party. And I do believe that in some of those conversations, there are things that are happening on the floor. These machinations are happening on the floor. And sometimes the leadership of your party, in this case, the Republican Party, will be making claims in order to try to twist arms and get people in line. And a lot of times, information and truth is currency. So sometimes to be able to fact check some of the claims that McCarthy is making, whether Democrats are going to defect or not, et cetera, is important in order to keep him honest and to keep people honest in general. And so, I think what was important today was to send the message that we were united behind Hakeem Jeffries as the now minority leader or as leader of the Democrats, and that there would be no defections, that Democrats are here, we're not going anywhere. And if they want to play ball, we're open to that.
That's going to make a lot of people, I think, on one side of the aisle very happy.
Yeah, totally. And again, AOC clearly just pandering to the MSNBC audience of normie libs, acting like it's something to be proud of. The fact they all just fell in line behind anti-progressive minority leader Hakeem Jeffries, someone that is no friend to the movement that AOC claims to be a part of and was definitely elected by, that being the progressive movement.
Yeah, I mean, embarrassing that they have absolutely no shame. Just voting for a guy that fucking actively derided. Not that that wasn't true of Nancy Pelosi. She probably hated them just as much, if not slightly more. But anyway, shout out to you, Brian. My Swiffer just fell down. Sorry. The Freedom Caucus dragging this out to 15 ballots proves once and for all the fraud squad have jelly for spines, utter absurdity, and fuel for cynics. Yeah, absolutely. 100%, Kelly. It's embarrassing as fuck that the squad wouldn't do this, that they wouldn't engage in a single tactic, that they wanted to fall in line, that they were so concerned about their own careerism and so afraid of the media machine that, in spite of the fact that an ocean of dedicated supporters sent them their last dollars and, knocked doors for them, that they would not put their necks out in return. So that was a real bummer, but a learning experience. And shout out to you, Kelly. Really appreciate the super chat.
Yeah, thank you so much, Kelly. Really appreciate that and totally agree. Unfortunately, the squad does have jelly for spines. They're completely unwilling and unable to resist leadership of their own party in any meaningful way, leading many people like Zach and I to point out what the fuck is the point of them being there in the first place. But yeah, thank you so much, Kelly. Really appreciate that. And thank you so much, Lamar Kamiri, for the $49.99. Really, really appreciate that generous super sticker, comrade. Thank you so much for the support.
Yeah, shout out to you. I'm not sure I've seen you in our chat before, Lamar, but shout out to you. Really appreciate that generous donation, and I hope you enjoy the show.
Yeah, thank you so much, dude. That's really, really helpful. Really appreciated. And thank you, Brian, for the $1.99. You don't have to tell us this, Brian. You don't have to tell us. Brian says Chomsky was also wrong on force the vote. Yeah, he was wrong on force the vote. And the reason why everyone knows that is because we asked him about it. When we had him on the show back in 2020 on the Vanguard, we asked him about force the vote, what he thought about the strategy, because it was the hot topic at the time. And he basically told us that it was stupid and that equated asking for Medicare for all to a kid asking for candy, which is ridiculous and just kind of insulting to the movement itself, in my opinion. But, much love for Chomsky. Got a lot of respect for the guy. But yeah, he absolutely was wrong about that, as we exposed.
That was my favorite piece of performance art that Gavin's ever done, was he chugged an entire liter of Coca-Cola right in front of Noam Chomsky like it was his goddamn mission on Earth. Like he was just like fucking. It was amazing. It was amazing. It was glorious. And in every video where it got the clip of us asking Noam Chomsky about force the vote was just Gavin just guzzling a fucking Coca-Cola in the background.
Yeah, that was pretty good stuff.
Is there anything worse than a condescending prick who's also dead wrong? I can't find any respect in my heart for these people. They make my blood boil. You know what? The Vanguard goes after so many people that I just cannot figure out exactly who you're referencing in this tweet. I don't know if it's like everybody. Yeah, Anna Kasparian, Cenk, Huger, Jimmy, everybody we roasted. But you know what? I also don't like to be condescended to. So I'm gonna sign off on that one. I'm gonna retweet that, Matt Ocelot God. Thank you for the $5.
Yeah, thanks, Matt Ocelot God. We always really appreciate hearing from you. And I totally agree. Although I also agree with Zach that I'm not quite sure whether you're talking about Anna Kasparian or Jimmy Dore or someone in between. But still, I couldn't agree more with the sentiment. Always appreciate your donations, man. And shout out to you, Brian, once again. According to Cenk, Medicare for All isn't popular. Yep, Zach pointed that out. Medicare for All is incredibly popular, not just with Democrats, but with independents and Republicans as well.
Oh, yeah. I mean, again, like I said, yes, people, do you want this insane burden that makes you stressed out of your mind about, and do you want to just take care of everybody else so they don't have that stress or burden anymore? Reasonable requests from people like, hey, we run fire departments, we run public schools, we run the fucking biggest military on earth. You think we can't run some fucking hospitals? All right, let's figure it out.
Yeah, exactly. Also, shout out to you, Mr. Polston. Really appreciate that. $9.99. Thanks so much for tuning in today.
Yeah, shout out to you, Dad. LOL.
Really appreciate that. And shout out to you, the Blues guy. FYI, Justin is now playing for the Detroit Lions. Have you guys played with any of the new AI sites like ChatGPT? That's cool. I was aware that Justin was still playing football, just not for the Chargers anymore. But yeah, I hope he's doing well. We'd love to chat with him at any point if he ever wants to dip his toes back in the water of progressive media. And I have not played with any of those sites. I played with some of the like AI art generator websites, like I forget what it was called, but the one where you type something in and it would generate a piece of AI art based on that. I played with some of those.
DALL-E one?
Yeah, DALL-E. That was pretty cool. I enjoyed fucking around with that. I created some crazy shit with that. But yeah, I haven't heard of ChatGPT, so I'll have to check that out, the Blues guy.
Oh, yeah, shout out to you, the Blues guy. And just so that we give a little bit of an update on the homie Justin Jackson, this is what he was most recently up to a few weeks ago in the NFL.
Jackson inside the 10 to the 5. He dives for a Lions touchdown.
So yeah, doing good over there, right? I think that's his one touchdown of the season. So proud of him to get that on, and hopefully he doesn't have to bounce around again. Hopefully he can get some stability in the Lions. It's tough making it as a running back in the league, though, for sure. Boeing 757, great comments. It's laughable that folks justify the squad asking for nothing after being elected to fight. Oh, and these great fighters just voted for Jeffries without any asks or concessions. Enjoy your weekend. Yeah. It's pathetic is what it is. It's extremely discouraging. It's hard to be even more discouraged than we've already been because you've been let down by them. There's no lower to go. But yeah, I mean, it's absurd that they were so ardent in their assertion that they could absolutely never do this. Oh, look at what the fucking consequences would be. And then we just see these like fuck all Republicans like Matt Gaetz and Lauren Boebert just show up and be like, yeah, we're fucking doing it. Get out of our way. Like, fuck you. We got elected already. And it's just like, God damn it. Like, those people are not role models, but this one tactics that they're employing, it would have showed some swagger and balls if it had come from the squad. And it kind of showed some swagger and balls coming from the Freedom Caucus.
Yeah, absolutely. Could not agree more with you, Bowen 757. Thanks for tuning in today. So glad you're enjoying the show. And yeah, like I said, it was totally depressing watching all the progressives, the quote unquote progressives, just cast their vote. No problem. Here you go, Jeffries. Here you go. No, we're not even going to put up a fight at all. Completely depressing, completely pathetic. Thank you so much for the super chat. As always, really appreciate you. Also, the Sinister Mister, thanks for the $5. Is this wackaloon Cenk insinuating that Medicare for All is not as popular as $15 an hour minimum wage? Yep. As we said, that is what he insinuated. Completely ridiculous.
Yep. Again, Medicare for yeah. And also, I mean, I think technically like $15 minimum wage is more popular, right? But the implication that Medicare for All is like some fringe, policy that's unpopular is like, even Fox News used to have to put up fucking exit polls saying like, oh yeah, we asked people how they felt about, Medicare for All, and it was like above water in all 50 states. So.
Yeah, absolutely. Also shout out to you, Cheryl. Thank you so much for the $20. Great show. Jimmy just loves to hate. Yeah. There's no doubt about it. And, I love Jimmy Dore's righteous anger when it's directed at the proper source, like when it's directed at someone who's deserving of it. I think it's great. That's why I used to be a big fan of Jimmy Dore's show back in the day. I think that when he's directing that righteous anger at the establishment or at the right wing, then that's awesome. But when he's directing to people that literally agree with him and distort their own words and opinions in order to fit his narrative and to boost his ego and get, him more clicks and dunks online, then that is shitty. And I think it is really unfortunate and counterproductive.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I think that, Jimmy does love to hate, and that's absolutely sure. It's always a good model on YouTube, right? And I mean, Gavin and I have done our own fair share of hating, and I always my rule of thumb is that I try and make it at least justifiable, right? Sometimes I've gotten that fucking way wrong, and I try and come out here and apologize. And I feel like over the last year or so, Gavin and I have done a lot better job of fucking saving our righteous anger for when it's like a adequate cause. But yeah, shout out to you, Cheryl. Always great to see you in the chat, and I'm glad you liked today's show. I'm confused. Wasn't Krystal one of the most consistent force to vote people? Why does Jimmy treat the online space like a battle rapper? Yeah, I put up that clip of Jimmy himself talking about how Krystal Ball did such an amazing job articulating force to vote, being a stern supporter of it, facing the backlash, all the stuff that he's pretending that she didn't do now. It's absurd, and it's transparent that he's just in his feelings and butthurt about his relationship with Kyle and Krystal, and the fact that their show is taking off. It seems.
Yeah, totally agree, Kevin. Thank you so much for the $4.99. And yes, Krystal was literally one of the most consistent force the vote people. She had Jimmy Dore on Rising back when her and Saagar were still co-hosting Rising. I remember that interview really blew up. It really helped popularize the concept in the first place. And yeah, you're 100% correct about Jimmy Dore treating the online space like a battle rapper, which I'm in favor of, and which is cool, as long as you're directing that sort of energy and that sort of anger against your actual fucking enemies, not people that are your allies who agree with you, distorting their words and lying about them in the process. And that's a good segue into Brian's next super chat, which we kind of already addressed, but he said, let's focus less on Jimmy's tone and more on the substance of his argument about force to vote, which has been proven correct. Brian, we've been focusing on the substance of this argument for a long time, and we've been giving Jimmy Dore credit for being correct about the substance of the argument around force to vote since the very beginning. We spent the first half of today's show, before we even brought up his fucking name, talking about the substance of the argument and how obviously the strategy of force to vote was 100% correct. But in the show, we also do react to and review a lot of the media personalities and their tone and and the way they express themselves and their strategy as communicators too, which is why we were forced to talk about his inaccuracies and his failure to, properly give credit to the people who were his allies and are his allies, at least as it relates to the specific strategy.
Yeah, that's what I found so absurd about this. Is it's we have so many receipts of Krystal Ball not behaving the way that he's inferring, oh guys, just listen to the way that she's lying to you right here. It's so obscure. It's because she's not.
Exactly. And shout out to you, Del0373 for the 499.
I think you're in the wrong chat, buddy.
You two are trying to maintain alliance with Krystal and weak Kyle. No, I'm trying to maintain alliance with people that support the right strategies, which is why we've given Jimmy Dore credit. And we've said that, he's 100% right about force the vote. He was 100% right about force the vote, as were Krystal and Kyle, and they continue to be too.
Yep, absolutely. Shout out to you, Del. Really appreciate that $4.99. But yeah, they literally vocal supporters of Force the Vote. I think Kyle even was on the Force the Vote live stream too, to come on and talk about how he supported it. I know for a fact Krystal was, but I'm pretty sure I remember Kyle being there too. So
he was
just it completely insincere because Kyle didn't vocally defend Jimmy enough when Anna Kasparian and TYT had a falling out. Just insane levels of pettiness for not white knighting for the guy in the way that he wanted. And also, yeah. Never mind. We won't get into the Corin story. Jimmy is just pissed they didn't mention his name. I think that could have a lot to do with it. And I know that she intentionally didn't mention Jimmy's name because she didn't want to fucking have to deal with Jimmy's fucking wrath or be a part of him or be associated with him in any way because he's fucking so unlikable.
Right. I totally agree with that, hippie killer. I think the part of the reason why he's upset is because they just didn't mention his name and give him credit when, dude, it's not about you. Yeah, good job. You came up with a good policy. You helped popularize a good strategy, but this isn't fucking about you, bro. We can talk about politics and the strategy and divorce it from the personal, circus. And I think that's the correct thing to do if you're Krystal Ball. Obviously, on this show, we do like to talk about personalities and the drama surrounding them quite a bit. But Breaking Points isn't really that kind of show, and they're just trying to stick to the policy. So shout out to you, hippie killer. Really appreciate that. And also shout out to Boeing 757 once again for the $10. That's super generous. Thank you for your contribution, Boeing. Disagree. Krystal is stating that the squad dismissed Force the Vote because they had a second plan to work inside. Complete BS. They folded and had no plan to work inside. Well, I think that what she was saying, Boeing, was that that's why they were sidelined, because they did try to work inside rather than pursuing the more aggressive and antagonistic strategy of forcing the vote. So she was pointing out that by choosing to work inside behind closed doors, they disenfranchised themselves and sidelined themselves. She was calling them out for doing that.
Yeah, what happened right here is that Jimmy took a very like specific exchange that she was having with Saagar out of context, right? In which case he finds an example of her not defending force the vote ardently enough. But if you look back at everything that Krystal Ball has said when she was expounding on her thoughts, it would lead you to conclude that what she was implying was the fact that she was disappointed in the fact that they had not created another strategy. She knows clearly, if you watch that video that we began to play, she'll go on to talk about how they have no backup plan. They have no real strategy, right? These are all things that she has published and documented and put out, which is why it's absurd to pretend that she doesn't believe it because of a 30-second, 60-second clip where she's like vaguely alluding to it, but not like hammering it down, right? Like that's what's disingenuous about Jimmy's argument is that he is so desperate to find more targets for the anti-force because it's like a trigger word. You know, you get like a fuck ton of people that will come and watch your live stream if you start talking about force the vote again. It is a cash cow for him. It's like when he fights with Cenk and it's like a big deal for him. So he's looking for more of that material. The problem is he's looking for it from somebody who has consistently supported this policy, who has consistently said the squad doesn't have a plan. They're not looking out for you. It has consistently been correct on all of those issues. And then you're pretending that because in one like small clip where she was talking to her co-host, she infers it in a way that you didn't find like vicious enough. You didn't find it like, and now you're trying to convince everybody that she's an op and that she's trying to manipulate you into feeling sorry for the squad. That's what Jimmy's doing. And I completely disagree with that framework. Like I said, if you just Google Krystal Ball, force the vote, you can listen to her talk for probably hours talking about why this was a good idea, why this was something that the left should pursue, and why the squad has not developed a strategy to stand up to Nancy Pelosi. You can find all of that. So it's just absurd to me that because of one 60-second clip out there, I'm supposed to be like, oh yeah, she was lying about all of that because Jimmy thinks he inferred something else from this like fucking wink and headlock. Oh, this is the face she makes when she's lying to you. She's fucking lying to you. It's like, dude, she's literally not. And there is a mountain of evidence that would suggest otherwise. And that's how, you know, you're kind of just playing like mascot sports. It's like, oh, Jimmy knows a lot of his audience hates breaking points, so he wants to go after them and have something. It's really low hanging fruit. It's petty, and it's unserious.
Deeply unserious. Yeah, Krystal Ball has been one of the most vocal critics of the squad. She literally sparred with AOC on Twitter one time. I remember we discussed that. She's been consistently and vocally critical of the squad and their failure to adequately resist the leadership of the Democratic Party. And she's also never taken Jimmy Dore's bait and criticized him publicly. I don't think there's a single clip out there of Krystal Ball talking shit on Jimmy Dore. She's been a complete class act, totally professional about it, and has agreed with him on the substance, at least as it relates to force the vote, 100% of the time. So I don't think there's any excuse for him to, lie about her opinion on this and in the process call her a liar. I think it's ridiculous. And like Zach said, deeply unserious. So shout out to you, Bowen. A little bit of a disagreement there, but we still really appreciate you chiming in. And shout out to you, OA, for the $2. Chances Jimmy is in here with a new burner. Yeah, is Libtard01 in the room right now? Please raise your hand.
Will the real libtard please stand up? We're going to have a problem here.
Shout out to you, OA, though. Really appreciate that. And thank you, Kimberly Davis. Always appreciate seeing you as well. Again, a little bit of a disagreement, but we appreciate you chiming in. I find Jimmy's anger incredibly cathartic. Righteous anger is necessary. We don't have time to play nice anymore, and Jimmy gets that, and I love it. His authentic passion for change is awesome. Check your shadow. Okay. Well, I agree. Like I said, I also find Jimmy Dore's righteous anger incredibly cathartic when it's directed at the proper target, when he's going after the establishment or, fucking the liberal media or the conservative media or this or that politician. When he's going after the squad, I also find it incredibly cathartic. But when you're just directing anger at someone who's your ally and lying about their position in the process to make your audience turn on them and think that they're being dishonest, I don't think there's any excuse for that. I really don't think there's any excuse for that. And again, Krystal Ball, total class act, has been 100% correct on the substance from the very beginning.
100%. And he'll never use that vitriol on right-wing commentators. He always is so buddy-buddy with them. He's always so charitable to them. He always just glosses over their disagreements. But then you'll have one left-wing commentator who's never, ever fucking, who's never swiped at Jimmy. She never took any swipes at Jimmy. Jimmy started swiping at her and Kyle because of Kyle, not white knighting enough about his, joke about Anna Kasparian or whatever at work, whatever, fine. Now he's trying to make it an example of their politics, which is just insincere, right? He's taking his personal pettiness and trying to nefariously manipulate what Krystal Ball said into making her seem like a liar and somebody who doesn't support things that she actively supports. I would challenge you, Kimberly, to find an example of him doing that to another commentator that he doesn't have personal petty beef with, particularly like a right winger. Like when he has Peter Schiff on his show to talk about the economy, does he dredge up all the most odious and fucking horrid things that Peter Schiff has to say about the economy and about how we shouldn't have a minimum wage? And
or
how
Jackson Hinkle?
Or Jackson Hinkle? Exactly. No, of course not. He doesn't. He sweeps it all under the rug. He'll be like, oh, Jackson, blah, 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 blah. Like, you just said a bunch of horrible things, but that's okay. Like, we don't have to talk about that. And so it comes across as massively insincere. So, of course, when Jimmy's at his best, his anger is incredibly cathartic, right? And when he's on, he's on. He has had some good ideas. But I think it's just so obvious that the dude is not consistent when it comes to his criticisms and how he chooses to employ them, which is why it's frustrating for me when I see like a real miss from the guy.
Absolutely. Thank you, though, regardless, Kimberly. Appreciate you chiming in. And shout out to you, Brian, for the $4.99. Jimmy is wrong to call it a lie, but he is right that the squad had no real strategy to push for Medicare for all. I think that, Krystal would agree with that, Brian. I think that's the thing. And yeah, he is wrong to call it a lie. She didn't lie. He's the only one that lied in that clip. And yeah, the squad had no real strategy to push for Medicare for all. I think that Krystal would agree with that, Brian.
I think that's literally what she was saying. I think she was implying in her words there that reason that they were sidelined, like it wasn't like, oh yeah, blah blah blah. It was like, no, their own incompetence. They sidelined themselves. Like that was what I took away from the clip, because I wasn't trying to be like massively disingenuous in my reading of it. And not that you were. I'm referring to Jimmy, Brian. But anyway, really appreciate you, Brian. I don't think we have any disagreement right there. I totally agree that the squad had no strategy to push for Medicare for all. They said that point blank. They had no strategy. We all vote alone, all that shit, right? And I also agree that Jimmy is wrong to call it a lie and that was a desperate, shameful reach.
Absolutely. And once again, shout out to you, Brian. Jimmy is a jerk, but that is so far from damaging to the movement than the squad's repeated failures in office. Let's have some perspective on this matter. Yeah, I'm not saying that like his being a jerk is tantamount to the squad's failures to do anything to resist Pelosi. I'm not saying that these things are equally damaging to the movement, but our job here on the Vanguard, in case you haven't noticed, is to criticize other commentators on the left and to react to and discuss their content, which is all that we did with Jimmy Dore, just like how we do with Anna Kasparian or Kyle Kulinski or literally anyone else, fill in the blank. So yeah, no one's saying that, but I guess I agree with you.
Oh yeah, look, I mean, the idea that we all know that people who have actual power are more of a tangential, detriment to us. But I mean, that's already pretty much established, right? Like, what is there to say? Like, you all know that the squad is being completely ineffectual. The argument that I'm having with a lot of my arguments, the argument I'm having with a lot of the audience is that Jimmy Dore is like the universal truth teller and that he was not massively misrepresenting Krystal Ball's argument there. So we had to play the receipts. We had to, bail her out for that one, because again, that is kind of the thesis of our show, keeping tabs on the new media on the left. So, I would say that, that's pretty par for the course for the Vanguard. Shout out to you, Mr. Doug 41. Completely admire Matt Gaetz and Lauren Boebert for holding them accountable. Yeah, I would never use the word admire myself in regards to Matt Gaetz and Lauren Boebert, because I think they are really odious, like criminal fucking people. But yeah, I mean, in this one instance, that was a good technique that they employed to, extract power that they will use for nefarious things. That's true.
Agreed. Yeah, I definitely don't admire Matt Gaetz or Lauren Boebert. They're scum of the fucking earth. I admire the strategy they employed, and I wish the left would do the same thing. But yeah, shout out to you, Mr. Doug. Really appreciate the $10. Thanks for tuning in today. Hope you're enjoying the commentary. And shout out with you, Tony DeMio, for the $2. Who will Dore beef with next? Jordan Chariton, Katie Halper. Well, he's already beefed with Jordan Chariton quite a bit. Those two guys are, they had a breakup some years ago now, at least a couple of years ago now, and they've been not cool with each other for a while. So that's already happened. As far as Katie Halper, I don't know. Probably not. She doesn't really seem to beef with people in that way. She's not super adversarial. She's not usually trying to start shit, but we'll see.
Shout out to you, Tony. Good to hear from you. Appreciate the super chat. There will always be more beef for dinner. Squad and Dem Progressive all need primaries. A complete grift. Yeah, I don't think there's a single person in Congress that I would, if there was an authentic primary challenger that was going to do a better job and be more serious, I say have at it.
100%. Yeah. you're not going to hear any argument from us on that front, Pedro. Really appreciate the $6. Thanks for tuning in as always. And shout out to you, Rex, for the 199 digression. Why is Matt Taibbi persona non grata? Not actually sure what you're referring to, Rex. I'm not sure if you mean persona non grata on our show or on the left or in the context of Force the Vote. I really am not quite sure what context you're referring to here. I mean, I think Matt Taibbi's done a lot of great reporting over the years. I really loved his book, Hate Inc., as well as a lot of the other reporting he did back in the day. Recently, he has, I think been pandering a little bit more to the right wing, going on Ben Shapiro, talking about how great Matt Walsh's shitty transphobic documentary was, stuff like that. So, there's a couple of reasons like that where he's kind of cuddled up to or pandered to the right wing that I think has made him persona non grata in some leftist spaces. We would still happily interview him and, talk about our disagreements here on the Vanguard if he was ever interested in. So he's not persona non grata here, although we have expressed our disagreements with him repeatedly.
Oh yeah, 100%. I would happily have him on. But yeah, I mean, the going on Ben Shapiro and, talking about how the left has no sense of humor. And that's why all these young leftists are becoming right wingers. And then, not engaging with the data that actually as people age, they are not becoming more conservative and that you're just living in your own fantasy world because you don't like trans people, I think has driven a wedge between him and the rest of the left. But absolutely, the guy's written some great books and I'd be happy to talk to him about that kind of thing. And, also talk about why we don't have a sense of humor because we're leftists and young people.
Yeah, absolutely. And shout out to you, Russell, for the $4.99. Enjoy your content, but seeing all the white tubers talking about working class POC who earn their way to Congress are cowards. Doesn't sit well, TBH. I mean, I appreciate you, adding your input there, Russell. And sorry that it didn't sit well with you. But in case you're not aware, it's not just white commentators that are making this point. There's plenty of commentators of color, chiefly Brown and Joy Gray, who I think has been one of the most articulate as far as pointing out some of the failures of the squad. So I mean, I just can't say I agree with that. It's not just like it's white people that are making these points.
And not only that, I think that what it comes down to is that, Bernie Sanders is somebody that we're also massively critical of. That's an old white guy, right? I never mince words when it comes to my fucking criticisms of Bernie Sanders. He abandoned the movement. He let us all down. And while I heed your point that, we are talking about people of color, I think they've kind of transcended their working class backgrounds now that they are seating members of Congress. And I'm not critiquing them on their personality. I'm critiquing them on their ineffectual, role that they've played. And I'm also critiquing them on the fact that they did the exact opposite of what they said they would do. I personally, along with Gavin, interviewed the likes of Cori Bush, right? She was completely generous with her time and gracious and friendly. And we had a wonderful time talking to her. And what she said was, if she was elected to Congress, that she was going to be on TV every single day, making a fuss about things that people needed, like Medicare for all, like a Green New Deal, like raising the minimum wage. And that if there was a camera that would have her, she was going to sit in front of it and she was going to have the largest microphone that she could possibly wield because that's what her community needed and demanded. That is not what we've seen from Cori Bush. So this is absolutely not a personally motivated attack on a woman who came from a working class background, was a tremendous advocate in Ferguson. Gavin and I are from Missouri. Followed a lot of what was happening on the outskirts of St. Louis a lot. She was just an outstanding activist. But I do think it's fair to say that Cori Bush has not gone to the Capitol and done that. She has not gone to the halls of Congress and done that. Right. She's done some cool things. She's made some, cool quips and said some things that I really agree with and, done some things that I really agree with. But that would just be like one example where it's like, I'm not critiquing this woman, right? I'm critiquing the fact that she and the others are not doing what they proclaimed that they were going to do, right? Bernie Sanders, he said that he was going to lead a revolution. He did not. He bent the knee, he bent over, and I've been massively critical of him as well, right? So, I mean, I think that really what it just comes down to is basically all of our progressive representation, to the extent that we have it, is in the form of people of color or minorities. Bernie Sanders is a Jewish man, right? So when we are critical of them, it's because all these criticisms apply to everybody else. Everybody else is already bought off by corporations. Everybody else is already just like a non-issue. It's not even up for discussion, right? These people, referring to the squad, right, came to Congress with a new mission, right? A new way of doing things, or a proclaimed new way of doing things. And so when we see them behave in the old way, it is frustrating. But I appreciate your perspective, Russell. And, I don't want it to come across as like I'm attacking these people because of, their, race or background or, whatever. Obviously, that's not the case.
Of course not. Appreciate the super chat regardless, Russell. And we're glad you're enjoying the content. And thank you so much, Keeper of Traken, for the $5. I think some of your criticisms of Jimmy are valid. I also find it interesting that Krystal refused to say force the vote or Jimmy's name in that clip. I mean, yeah, I think the reason why she didn't say Jimmy's name in that clip is because this is no longer about Jimmy fucking Dore. Like, this conversation at this point has transcended Jimmy Dore. The context of that clip was they were talking about Matt Gaetz and the Freedom Caucus holding up Kevin McCarthy's speakership in order to get concessions. And then she said, it's kind of like a couple of years ago when some people were asking the squad to do the same thing. But this is no longer about Jimmy Dore. They're talking about the policy as it relates to the current speakership battle in the Republican Party. And that's why she didn't go down the rabbit hole of rehashing the Jimmy Dore drama.
100%. Shout out to you, Keeper. Yeah, I mean, it really just comes down to the fact that she didn't want to engage with Jimmy Dore at all because he's been massively uncharitable and kind of a dick to her and her fiance. So, Keeper of Trekken. But shout out to you, Kevin Wood. I'd love a breakdown of the incentive structure of folks like Jimmy and Hinkle for attacking other YouTube hosts. Are they trying to fragment the audience? No, they're just trying to get clicks. They're trying to be relevant. People like to watch a fireworks show. How the fuck do you think the Vanguard built our channel, right? Like, that's true. It's 100% true. What we have done as our pivoting process and our, hashtag growth is the Vanguard now, we try and make sure that we're like explicitly only attacking people who are just like dog shit bad faith actors and like really bringing the hammer down on people when they're being bad faith. And, if anybody disagrees with us and, on their own merits, then, try and be nicer about it.
Yeah, I really do think it's mostly for clicks. And yeah, I can't say we're above that. We've also made drama a big part of our show. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I just think when you start lying about people and being dishonest about their positions, that's when it becomes worthy of criticism. But shout out to you, Kevin. Really appreciate the $4.99. And this one's for you, Zach.
Shout out to Kevin. Jimmy is just pointing out the cover she is giving them. She literally hasn't been giving them cover. I played a fucking whole clip of Jimmy celebrating her about this when it was way more relevant. Like, what are you talking about? 2 years later, she's decided that she's going to provide cover for the squad. We pointed out she's beefed with AOC on Twitter. She's not getting access to these people. She's never had access to these people. And Krystal Ball is actively on our side. That's the thing that's fucked up about this. Is like, if you think Krystal Ball's not on our side, then you're just ready to lose forever. You're like, oh, I'm going to write off literally everybody besides Jimmy Dore, and that's fine. That's the only truth teller. I'm going to have me, Jimmy Dore, and Chris Hedges, and that's it. And that's going to be the left in this country, and we're going to be pure, and we're going to lose every single fucking election. Okay, it's ridiculous. So that's the one nefarious element of what Jimmy's doing here is he's taking people that are good-hearted, good people like Kevin 1963 and trying to portray Krystal Ball to them as some sort of like lying nefarious actor. Like, that's not true. That's super detrimental. Like, you can disagree with Krystal Ball. She's not a fucking CIA agent, and it's kind of absurd and really silly and damaging to the broader left movement to try and portray people like that. Like, no, she's not running cover for the squad. Jimmy took a massively selective piece of out of context video and then projected all of this like horse shit on top of it. It was really lazy and low hanging fruit.
Yeah, it was completely dishonest. And yeah, that's just not accurate, Kevin. Unfortunately, she's not giving them cover at all. Anyway, thank you so much for the super chat. Regardless, appreciate hearing your opinion. And thank you, Jimmy, for the $5. If you still like Jimmy Dore and are on the left, you have serious mom or dad issues. What is with all this drama? Get over yourselves. It isn't about your feelings. Yeah, I totally agree with that for the most part, Jimmy. I don't blame people that like Jimmy Dore, but I think that he's become an increasingly toxic figure in the online left, whatever you want to call it, if you even want to call him a leftist anymore. But yeah, largely I agree with you, Jimmy.
Yep. Shout out to you, Jimmy. I kind of agree.
Yeah, he's hella toxic, and unfortunately it has become quite counterproductive. Also, shout out to you, Virtuoso. Ever since Kurt Metzger joined the Jimmy Dore show, the quality of the program has tanked. Graham Elwood and Ron Placone were way funnier than that hack. Yeah, I totally agree, man. Kurt Metzger is a total fucking imbecile. He's not funny. Graham Elwood and especially Ron Placone were way funnier and had way more intelligent contributions to make to that show. I think that it was way better when they were around as well. They kind of kept Jimmy in check rather than just, constantly agreeing with him and enabling him like Kurt does.
Oh, yeah. See, Ron's his own person, right? Like, and I don't know Graham, so I won't speak to that, but I do know Ron. And Ron is like a fucking great guy. He's a humanist. He wants what's best for the world. You can disagree with him, and he doesn't like fucking clobber you. Just a really likable guy. And honestly, what I always thought was a real counterbalance to Jimmy, right? Like, they were both funny on the show, but like Ron was funny in a much more laid back kind of a way, and then Jimmy was like obviously way more aggressive. And I thought that they really fucking, balanced each other out, because it wasn't just like Ron trying to get pats on the head from Jimmy Dore all day. Like Kurt Metzger just sits there like a fucking dog waiting for Jimmy to like ruffle him behind the ears a little bit. It's just like he just is desperate for a little bit of like a fucking cookie or something from Jimmy Dore. It's pathetic and sad, and he's also just not that funny, right? So whatever.
Yeah, he's a total fucking dunce. I agree, and also just not very funny. Thank you also, Jimmy, for the $2. This is a fresh air show. I'm guessing you're referring to our show. Do you know what he means by a fresh air show, Zach?
Man, I'm fresh as all air, bro. No, I don't know what he's saying, but I'm gonna take that as a compliment. Shout out to you, Jimmy.
Yeah, thanks, Jimmy. Really appreciate it. Hope you're enjoying the show today. And shout out to you for the very generous $20 super chat. Just Binia, Slava Ukraini. Convince me money spent on Ukraine would instead have been spent in the USA. Show me where the last 50 years we went that. Show me when in the last 50 years we spent that money at home. I'll wait for these receipts.
We haven't, dummy. That's why we want to fucking spend it here.
Yeah, that's basically what I was about to say. Yeah, that's not to say that like if we hadn't have spent $100 billion on Ukraine, it all would have gone into the pockets of the American people. That's not really the criticism. I see what you're saying. That's not really the criticism, though. The criticism is there's an incredible amount of hesitancy and fear mongering and propaganda whenever money is spent domestically, whenever programs like Medicare for All or free college are proposed. But then in the blink of the eye, just as much, if not more money is flushed down the drain to Ukraine instead of going to these, domestic causes. So yeah, no, I think that's a little bit of a mischaracterization of the argument, but we appreciate the super chat regardless. And, thanks so much for tuning in today.
Yeah, and I want you to ask yourself how much money you think Ukraine would have gotten if it wasn't because the United States was just washing its funds in a massive military industrial complex, and not because we have any kind of humanitarian value at all. Values that's at all, because we do not. But anyway, shout out to you, Justina. And if you are actually on the ground in Ukraine, like fucking God bless you, man. Like Gavin and I are not religious folks, but you know, Jesus Christ, that is a fucked up war. And Gavin, I don't want to come off as like some fucking cold ass bastard, because I don't want to throw like gasoline on a fire right now with the United States weapons. Happy to send all kinds of non-lethal aid, right? Anything that's like blankets, food, medicine, humanitarian, actually. But these like, defensive missile systems and all that kind of shit, no, not fucking with it.
Yeah. Also, we got Libtard01 in the chat. What's up, Jimmy? How's it going? Come back on the show at any point. We'd love to chat. Russell Dinkins, using identity politics to defend the squad. You should get an internship at the FBI. You'd fit right in, LOL. And that's in reference to the comrade that chatted us just a few moments ago, saying that our commentary didn't sit right with him calling the squad members cowards because of the fact that they're working class people of color, which Zach, I think, accurately pointed out these people aren't working class anymore, but they are people of color. And yeah, we disagreed with that. I think there's lots of voices of color on the left that have also called out the squad and made similar criticisms of them. So yeah, again, I'm not sure if this is actually Jimmy Dore or not, but that is pretty funny.
LOL. Shout out to you, Libtard01. My favorite libtard of all the libtards. Let's see. And yeah, look, I mean, I disagree with Russell a little bit, but I see where he's coming from. So I don't, shout out to him for, expressing his different opinion as well.
Yeah, no shade at Russell. I think he's a, good faith comrade who might just have a little bit of a different perspective than us on this matter. But yeah, shout out to you, Jimmy. If that's actually you, come back on the show. We'd love to chat. And shout out to you, Kevin, for the $1.99. I am the only Kevin. All the others, BTFO, JK, LOL. Yeah, we do have a couple Kevins competing right now for the super chats. But thank you so much for the $1.99.
Yeah, absolutely. Shout out to you, Kevin. Really appreciate that. One true Kevin to rule them all. Absolutely. Just saying on YouTube, Bernie doesn't get heat like the squad. Why? I think it's because there's a lot more members of the squad and they group themselves together and they have a catchy name. And so it's easier to use them as like a catch-all for the progressive movement in Congress. I found myself doing this a lot of the time. I'll just say the squad, and in my mind, I'm including Bernie Sanders too, even though he's a standalone figure in the Senate, right? Which is why it's easier to forget about him. We get to see the lack of coalition building with the squad. We get to see them not organized with one another, even though there is a group. And they were the ones that went in and said, hey, we need to, fucking have solidarity, build our numbers, like, do all of these kinds of things. So I would say that the biggest reason why the squad gets heat that Bernie doesn't is because it's easier to forget about Bernie being in the Senate and chugging along, right? There is no group of people that you can point to in the Senate. And I would also point out that when I say the squad, I'm usually also referring to guys like Ro Khanna. Okay. Ro Khanna as anything but working class, right? That dude is Silicon Valley by the numbers. Okay, so I mean, I really am not trying to like. I just think that because there's so many more members of Congress that vaguely, tangentially have progressive politics, that it's easier to just loop them all under the term the squad and use that as like a catch-all for the failures of the progressive movement legislatively in the halls of Congress. But you're right, Russell, people do use the squad way more than they single out Bernie Sanders. Again, I think that has more to do with the fact that there's like half a dozen squad members plus, and then there's one Bernie Sanders. But I heed your point. He does take less shit.
I would say another part of the reason why he takes less shit is because Bernie has already accomplished a lot in his career and in his lifetime as a movement leader, as a politician, as an activist, etc. He's at the end of his career, a career which he has long been consistent. He never sold out over, in which he has achieved quite a lot of success for the movement. He basically is responsible for the modern day progressive movement in this country, versus the squad members, AOC likes, they're still at the beginning of their career and they're already showing signs of selling out. In my opinion, they already have sold out. But again, Bernie's at the end of his career. He's already done a lot. He's an old man. He's about ready to retire. I think people are a little bit more willing to forgive him when he fails to present the antagonistic, aggressive challenge to the establishment, versus the squad members are young and spry and have just got there. And now is when they should really be rearing their horns and, going full bore on these corporate sellouts like Nancy Pelosi. So I think that's also part of the reason why. But shout out to you, Russell. Really appreciate the super chat. Appreciate you sharing your perspective and for watching the show today, man.
Yeah, absolutely. Shout out to you, Russell. And excited to respond also to Kevin 1963. I was not trying to put you on blast, Kevin. I was just responding to, your message. But yeah, I'm glad to know that you weren't alluding to the fact that Krystal was the enemy, because I think that that's detrimental, right? We can't, it's so funny because you'll have Jimmy Dore being like, we need big tent politics, let the racists and homophobes and turfs in, and then it's like the second somebody disagrees with a point he made 3 years ago, it's like, fuck this person, get him out of here. It's like, oh yeah, it's not such a big tent anymore, huh, Jimmy? Right? It's just people that will lick your nuts. Okay. Exactly. I understand the game now. But being polite and giving them credit for good intention, it gives them cover. Yeah, I just don't think she was doing that. I think it was a massively deceptive video. And if you watch a lot of Krystal Ball's other content, you'll see that she has absolutely no problem calling out the squad or Bernie Sanders or any of these other nefarious actors. And I think that she correctly identifies a lot of the flaws in our system. Even if we don't agree on everything, I would say that I have I'm probably 85% in agreement with Krystal Ball on politics. That's a lot. That's huge. Okay, Gavin and I are probably only at like 90, 95. We can find some shit to argue about. You know what I mean? And we do. Sometimes we'll just stumble across it and we'll be here for like an extra hour because we got to fucking sift through that, right? But anyway, shout out to you, Kevin. Wasn't trying to come for you. Glad we're all on the same page. Based Krystal Ball. Okay, moving on.
Yeah, thanks so much, Kevin. Really appreciate that. Also, again, this is kind of about the tone. Like, Krystal's more polite than Jimmy Dore. Therefore, they disagree. No, that's not what that means, actually. Just because you're expressing your opinion in a slightly more like professional manner and you're not waving your finger and chastising people and shouting at the camera with a red face and a Negroni in your hand doesn't mean that you're like, it doesn't mean you have a difference of opinion on the actual policy itself. It just means that you're communicating in a little bit of a more restrained fashion, which is Krystal's style. Not everyone needs to be as angry and belligerent as Jimmy Dore. That's his shtick, and that's fine. That's clearly his appeal. But not everyone has to have the same amount of vitriol in order to come to the same conclusion. So thank you so much for the super chat, Kevin. Really appreciate it. Like Zach said, glad we're on the same page. Thanks for the support, man. And looks like one last super chat from NL. Thanks so much for the $5. What's the purpose of blind testing? Do you know what he's talking about, Zach?
I actually have no idea. If you mean means testing, it's to make sure that we can gut those those programs and make them shittier and then blame them for not working. If you're talking about blind testing and like a study for medicine, they do double blind tests so that you're not fucked with like by the placebo of the placebo phenomenon. In order for medication to be passed by the FDA, it has to beat the placebo by a certain percentage points, right? That's why Big Pharma paid a bunch of money to make the placebo effect rule like slightly less, because most like depression and anxiety or different kinds of medication like that, they barely beat the placebo, but they're just sold onto you for more money so that they can enrich themselves. Anyway, Big Pharma bullshit, but that's all I could take away from that. Shout out to you, NL, for the £5.
Yeah, thanks so much for the super chat, man. Again, I'm not really sure what you're referring to and how it's relevant to this conversation, but feel free to clarify before we get out of here. Last couple minutes of the live stream, but yeah, thank you so much for the super chat, man. Really do appreciate that. And yeah, it looks like we're wrapping up right in time. I know you have to get to work, Zach, so this is actually perfect timing for the super chats to dry up. Again, if anyone wants to shoot us one last one, you can do so now as we shout out the patrons. But before we do that, do you have any closing words, Zach?
Oh yeah, no, I'll probably get the fuck out of here. Shout out to everybody that supports us on Patreon. Comrades, Vanguardians, Super Vanguardians, you're all comrades in our heart. Appreciate everybody tuning in for a little bit of a lunch guard stream. Usually in the afternoon times on the weekends it's better, and then in the evening times on the weekdays we get a little bit more traction. So we try and float around when you guys are here to chat with us, vibe with us. We love a fat Vanguard community, love a good dialogue, love all the haters in the chat. I'll miss you while I'm at work today, guys. Peace out, everybody, and I know Gavin will steer this ship into the sunset.
Yeah, peace out, Zach. I'll see you around. And huge shout out to the patrons. Thank you guys so much for the support. You guys know that we like to start and end all of our live streams with a big old shout out to the patron community. Really, really appreciate the support. And speaking of support, thank you so much, Just Beania, for the $20. Love you guys, even if I disagree on Ukraine. Just wanted to slap out some support. Be good. Well, thank you so much, man. We really do appreciate that. And of course, we can handle good faith disagreement. I'm sure we disagree about some of the specifics of the policy, but I'm sure we could find a lot of area of agreement as well. So thank you so much, Just Beania. We really appreciate that. Thank you so much. And yeah, huge shout out to the patrons. Hit up that link in the description, guys, if you want to support the show in the best way possible to keep us healthy, to keep us sustainable. Again, the link's going to be in the description. You guys can have your name up here on the shout out screen if you so desire. As well as access to our Discord community, plus priority in our monthly Q&As. Always a good time. So thank you so much for the support on Patreon, you guys. We really, really appreciate it. And thank you guys all so much for tuning in today. It was an awesome show, and we'll see you next time. And I just realized we actually got one more. Thank you so much, Blaine, for the $5. Hey, guys, almost threw something at my TV last night when all the Dims stood up for the 15th time. Hakeem Jeffries voted for himself. LOL. Yeah, I was also watching that, Blaine, last night on C-SPAN, and it was quite infuriating. Just totally disappointing to see the squad members so fucking gutless and so emasculated, as Chris Hedges once put it, by the Democratic Party leadership. No self-respect, voting for someone who actively hates them and opposes their goals and priorities. But, that is what it is. We'll be back soon. Thank you so much, Blaine. Thanks, everyone, for tuning in today. We'll see you next time.